So everybody, in last lecture we started the digestive system, and we talked about the parts of the digestive system. We talked about the mouth, the esophagus, stomach, small intestine. Uh, Today we will talk about the gastric glands present in the mucosa of the stomach. That means the glands in the mucosa of the stomach. That's why it is called gastric. Gastric means stomach. So glands in the mucosa of the stomach. Then we'll talk about the small intestine more. We'll talk about the large intestine, the largest gland of the body, which is also a part of your digestive system, the liver, and the pancreas. So if you just take a small part of the mucosa, innermost lining of the stomach out, and see under microscope, you will see that this is the mucosa, innermost layer. You know that in the wall of the GI tract there are 4 layers from inside to outside. Innermost layer is called the mucosa, then submucosa, musculus externa, and serosa. In the mucosa of the stomach, you have the gastric glands, and gastric glands are here, this part of the mucosa, and this part is called the gastric pit, the opening, and this is the gastric gland. Okay, so in the gastric gland, you see there are different types of cells shown by different colors. Okay, so we'll see what are those cells in the gastric gland. There are 4 different types of cells present in the gastric gland. Mucous neck cells. These are the cells that secrete thin acidic mucus. That's why called mucus cells. Then parietal cells, chief cells, and enteroendocrine cells. Parietal cells secrete hydrochloric acid, and chief cells secrete pepsinogen. Okay, then hydrochloric acid then works on this pepsinogen and converts the pepsinogen to pepsin. And pepsinogen is inactive. However, the pepsin is an active chemical. So this hydrochloric acid comes from the parietal cell, and pepsinogen comes from the chief cells, and then hydrochloric acid converts the inactive pepsinogen to active pepsin. Enteroendocrine cells secrete hormones. For example, gastrin. So here you can see this part is the gastric gland and this part is the gastric pit that I mentioned before. So the opening here, that part is the gastric pit, and then in the wall of the gastric pit, these cells are the mucus cells. Okay, so these are the mucus cells, and these cells are called the mucous neck cells, then parietal cells, chief cells, and enteroendocrine cells are these cells. Enteroendocrine cells, chief cells, parietal cells, mucous neck cells, and mucus cells. These are mucus cells. So mucus cells secrete mucus, and that makes a layer between the food content in the stomach and the wall of the stomach. So that mucus secretion, which forms a barrier between the food stuff and the wall of the stomach. So it gives a protection, protects the wall of the stomach. The food content in the stomach is acidic. Hydrochloric acid is secreted in the stomach. So that acidic food can burn the wall of the stomach, right? So because of the mucus, that layer, the acid cannot come contact to the wall, and that's how it protects the wall of the stomach from the acidic content inside the stomach. Now, you can think that if this is the stomach, you have acidic food content here, and in the wall you have a layer of mucus, that secretion here. So that layer separates the acid and the wall. Now if erosion occurs in the mucosa, that barrier is breached, then what will happen? The acid will come contact with the wall, and that will burn, make lesion or inflammation. So if inflammation occurs, redness and swelling occurs in the wall here, that is called gastritis. Gastritis. Itis is inflammation, gastric is stomach. So that will cause redness and swelling in the wall, and the person will feel burning sensation. So that is gastritis. Now if you don't treat gastritis, then the acid will start to cause more lesion to the wall, and if injury occurs by this acid, or by any other reason, that is termed as gastric ulcer. Okay, more advanced stage. Gastritis is initial, and ulcer is if injury occurs. Bleeding can also occur from the ulcer. Bleeding may occur. Okay. Here you see that the parietal cells secrete hydrochloric acid. So this is a parietal cell, secretes hydrochloric acid, and chief cells secrete pepsinogen. And hydrochloric acid converts the pepsinogen, inactive pepsinogen, to active pepsin. Then what happens? Pepsin itself converts the pepsinogen to pepsin. So hydrochloric acid converts pepsinogen to pepsin, then activated uh, pepsinogen, which is pepsin, works on pepsinogen to convert it to more pepsin. Now, gastric ulcer, which is also known as peptic ulcer, erosion and injury of the wall of the stomach. Prolonged acidic secretion and breaching of the mucosal wall that may lead to gastritis and gastric ulcer that I mentioned you before. But there is a bacteria that is called Helicobacter pylori. This bacteria loves to reside inside the stomach, and prolonged presence of Helicobacter pylori for a long time, it can stay years, will also cause gastric ulcer, can breach the wall. And Helicobacter pylori can also lead to stomach cancer. Ulcer as well as cancer. So peptic ulcer or gastric ulcer as well as stomach cancer. Regulation of gastric secretion, how the secretion inside the stomach, gastric secretion means secretion inside the stomach, is controlled. There are three phases of gastric secretion. One is called the cephalic phase, another is called the gastric phase, and the third one is the intestinal phase. Cephalic phase is the stimulus or reflex that would cause the secretion in the stomach even before the food enters into the stomach. For example, this is your stomach. Okay. This is stomach. And this is your duodenum. Okay. And what happens if you see food, like your eye, or you smell food, or even if you think about food. So what happens, this is your brain. So this is the brain. When you see, that signal goes to the brain. When you smell the food, that signal goes to the brain. And even if you think about food, that signal from the that signal stimulate the brain, and then brain sends signal to the stomach, to the gastric gland, to cause the secretion into the stomach. Also, this signal goes to the salivary gland in the mouth to secrete the saliva. So when you smell or see or think about food, salivary secretion as well as gastric secretion occurs. So you see that this gastric secretion occurs way before the food enters into the stomach, and that comes from the head. Head is the cephalic part of the body, cephalic. That's why that is called cephalic reflex or phase. Then the food enters into the stomach after you swallow the food, right? And the food breakdown of food occurs, and food becomes small molecules, and secretion from the gastric gland in the stomach occurs after the food arrives into the stomach, and that is called the gastric phase. Makes sense, because gastric means stomach and food is already in the stomach, and further secretion occurs. So that is called the gastric phase. And then what happens, the food after digestion in the stomach, the liquid food enters into the duodenum. Now duodenum checks the status of the food. Duodenum checks the status of the partially digested food, and if this duodenum thinks that the digestion was not enough, stomach has to digest more, it will send a signal to the stomach, to the gastric gland, and tell the gastric gland of the stomach to secrete more acids or enzymes to do a better job, to digest more. So you see, the duodenum can check the condition and can send signal, and this signal from the duodenum to the stomach is carried by hormone. Okay, so that's why this is called the intestinal phase, because duodenum is the first part of the intestine. So when the food arrives into the intestine, signal goes to the gastric gland, and that causes further secretion. So that is the intestinal phase of secretion. So secretion in the stomach from the gastric gland occurs in 3 phases. Small intestine has 3 parts. We already talked about that. First, short C-shaped part is called the duodenum. It is the shortest part and first part of the small intestine. And duodenum actually covers the head of the pancreas. So duodenum is like this. You see, this is the stomach and this is the duodenum, and your pancreas is here. This is the head of the pancreas, nicely fits in the C-shaped part of the duodenum. And this is the body of the pancreas, and this is the tail of the pancreas. Okay, so head part of pancreas nicely fits in that curvature. Uh, and this is the body, and this is the tail of the pancreas. Okay, and another important thing here is that you must remember that liver, and under the liver you have the gallbladder that stores the bile, right? So from the gallbladder a duct comes out that is called cystic duct. Takes the bile out from the gallbladder, and from the liver, two ducts come out. Those are the hepatic ducts, right and left hepatic ducts. Hepatic means liver, so right and left hepatic ducts, and they join together just outside of the uh, under the liver, and join together to form a duct that is called the common hepatic duct. Common hepatic duct. Okay, so you see cystic duct comes out from the gallbladder. This is the gallbladder, and right and left hepatic ducts come out from the liver, and they join to form the common hepatic duct. Then common hepatic duct and cystic duct join together to form the bile duct, and that enters into the duodenum. Okay, so this is the bile duct. We'll talk about this. Just this is how the bile enters into the duodenum. So we'll talk it later. So three parts of the small intestine: duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. Duodenum is retroperitoneal, that means behind the peritoneum, outside of the peritoneal cavity. Outside of peritoneal cavity. So here you see the liver, gallbladder, this is cystic duct, this is the hepatic duct, and this is the pancreas. The head of the pancreas nicely fits into that curve of the duodenum. Okay, and we talked about different parts of the GI tract before. This is a much clear picture, so I'm repeating again. You see, this is the gallbladder, and cystic duct comes out from the gallbladder. Right and left hepatic ducts come from the liver. They join to form the common hepatic duct that I mentioned, and then common hepatic duct and cystic duct, they join to form the bile duct. Okay, now you see that bile duct goes all the way down to the duodenum, but just before it enters into the duodenum from the pancreas, this is the pancreas, the main pancreatic duct, you see this is the main pancreatic duct, join with the bile duct and form an ampulla, wider part, expanded part, that is called hepatopancreatic ampulla. Hepatopancreatic ampulla. and then they enter into the duodenum through this opening that is called major duodenal papilla. So this is hepatopancreatic ampulla, this wider part where two ducts, main pancreatic duct and bile duct, join, and then the opening here for that uh, ampulla is called major duodenal papilla. Now you see from the main pancreatic duct a branch arises and enters into the duodenum too separately, and this tiny opening is called the minor duodenal papilla. It's not marked here, mentioned here, minor duodenal papilla. So two duodenal papilla, one is this one, the major, and another is smaller one, the minor. So that is how the bile arrives into the duodenum. Now remember, the bile is secreted from the liver. So liver secretes bile, and this bile is diluted, a lot of water in it, diluted bile. Then this bile goes to the gallbladder, and gallbladder doesn't produce or secrete bile. Gallbladder does what? Stores and concentrate, make that diluted bile highly concentrated bile. So here the bile is stored, as well as the water from the bile is absorbed by the wall. So the water leaves. So the bile becomes highly concentrated and stays there. Now when you eat fat-rich food, bile is needed to digest the fat. So the gallbladder contracts and the bile, concentrated bile, goes this way into the duodenum, okay, to digest the fat. And pancreas secretes pancreatic juice. Pancreatic juice, very important because it has all types of digestive enzymes I mentioned before: amylase, pancreatic amylase, lipase, protease. So pancreatic enzymes enter into the duodenum, and as well as bile enters into the duodenum, and those chemicals digest the food in the intestine. And in the stomach, mainly digestion occurs by the hydrochloric acid. We talked about that. Inside the small intestine, you have circular folds like this. I mentioned before, these are called plica circularis, circular folds. Plica circularis, okay, or circular folds. And then in each circular fold you have many finger-like tiny structures. These are called villi. And then, so if this is one villus, finger-like. On the villi, you have many hair-like structures. So this is villus singular, villi plural, and on a villus you have many microvilli. So plica circularis, then many villi and many microvilli. All these structures increase the surface area. So the foodstuffs are here. So more surface area means better absorption of the nutrients. Okay. Here you can see these are villi, and inside the villi, if you see a villus, you will see the blood vessels as well as lymphatic vessel. This lymphatic vessel is called lacteal, which absorbs the fat. So fat enters into the lymphatic circulation first, and the blood vessels, like these blood capillaries, absorb mostly proteins and carbohydrates. Fat molecules are larger and can easily enter into the lacteals, not into the blood capillaries. Okay, so the lymphatic capillaries inside the villi are called lacteals, and they are used to absorb the fats. Under the mucosa, you have submucosa, and in the submucosa of the late part of the intestine, you have Peyer's patches. Peyer's patches are aggregated lymphatic follicles. We talked about that in lymphatic system. Then you have Brunner's gland in the duodenum, uh, also called duodenal glands, and they secrete alkaline mucus. So mucus is secreted by the Brunner's gland. Liver is the largest gland of the body, also a part of the digestive system. A liver has two lobes, four lobes. Four lobes. Among the four lobes, the right lobe is the largest. Okay, left lobe is second largest. So left is smaller than the right. So this is the right lobe. This is the left lobe. And there are two more small lobes. We'll talk about that later. And right and left lobes are separated by a ligament which is attached here, and that is called the falciform ligament. Okay, and under the liver you have the gallbladder, and the falciform ligament that gets out from the liver and goes to the wall of the body wall, abdominal wall, and that is called the round ligament, also called ligamentum teres. So falciform ligament separates two lobes, and then it becomes round ligament or ligamentum teres to hang the liver to the wall of the abdomen. Now if you see under the liver, this is the bottom of the liver, you can see two other lobes. These are smaller. This is called the caudate lobe, and your inferior vena cava, you know, the large vein, superior inferior vena cava is attached here. That's why you see a depression here. sulcus for inferior vena cava. So caudate lobe is just beside the inferior vena cava. And this rectangular lobe is called quadrate. Quadrate means 4. So rectangular. And it is just next to the gallbladder. This is the gallbladder. Okay. So those are other two lobes of the liver. Now, if you see the structure of the liver tissue, if you see a histology of liver, like take a small amount of tissue and make a slide and put under the microscope, you'll see that liver cells are located into inside the many hexagonal, that means 6 angles, 1 2 3 4 5 6 hexagonal structures inside the liver. So many hexagonal structures, these are called the lobules. So inside the liver you have many lobules, and in the center of each lobule you have the central vein. You see here, central vein. Here. And the hepatocytes, these are the liver cells. You see the tiny cells. Hepatocytes are very nicely present like this. From the central vein, go towards the wall of the lobules. So these are hepatocytes like this. Okay. So hepatocytes are the liver cells. Hepatocytes. Okay. Hepatocytes secrete bile. That bile from the liver goes to the gallbladder. Now, in each corner of that hexagonal lobule, in each corner here, so in each corner you have 3 structures. You have a bile duct, an artery, and a vein. So let's see, next slide. You see this is a lobule, and in each corner of the lobule you have 3 structures: bile duct, this one, green one, and the artery. Here is a bile duct, portal arteriole, and portal venule, and these 3 structures together called the portal triad. So portal triad in each corner, and in the portal triad you have a bile duct, an arteriole, small artery, and a venule, small vein.